Fighting has intensified again in the Kursk region of Russia. Large-scale attacks by Russian and North Korean soldiers have begun here. The Ukrainian side is still successfully defending itself. As a result, an unprecedented massacre of Russian and North Korean soldiers has begun in Kursk, and the Ukrainian army is preparing for new combat maneuvers. Politico says that the Ukrainian command may consider the option of withdrawing troops from the Kursk region against the backdrop of the enemy army's counteroffensive gaining momentum. The publication notes that Ukrainian troops defending the occupied territories in Kursk region are being subjected to fierce attacks by the Russian army. Soon, the commanders of the Ukrainian armed forces will have to make a difficult choice to continue the fight or retreat. If they get the timing wrong, the Ukrainian military risks being cut off, warn military observers. Journalists cite military analyst Ilham Aliyev, who notes that the only reason to hold the Kursk bridgehead is to use this territory as a bargaining chip in future negotiations. At the same time, he adds, in the event of the loss of a significant number of experienced fighters and military equipment in a protracted defense, such a situation could create the risk of weakening Ukraine's military potential in other areas. The publication also cites a post by Ukrainian soldier Artem Karyakin on Facebook, who reported that the enemy is actively using its best drone crews in the Kursk region, which complicates logistics and the evacuation of the wounded. Some soldiers had to move on foot because transport couldn't get through, the soldier said. Russian and North Korean troops are advancing on 3 fronts, trying to squeeze the pocket and seize control of the strategic road to the Sumy region. As reported by the publication Focus, North Korean troops are involved in the fighting, and the Russian command is throwing them into the vanguard of the offensive in order to exhaust the Ukrainian forces. The DPRK soldiers are digging into their positions, and then Russian units are pulled in. According to military expert Oleg Zhdanov, regaining control over Kursk region is a strategic goal of the Russian Federation, and it will not spare human and technical resources to achieve it, so that Ukraine cannot use this factor in the negotiations. If the situation develops unfavorably, most likely a decision will be made to gradually withdraw from this territory, says Zhdanov. Another military expert, Alexander Kovalenko, says that a similar situation is developing in other areas of the front, in particular in the Donetsk region near Pokrovsk. The same thing happened in Bakhmut and Avdiivka, where Ukrainian defenders held back the enemy's advance for a long time, inflicting colossal losses on them. This does not mean that Ukrainian armed forces units need to be withdrawn from there. According to him, if the command followed this logic, the Russians would already be standing on the banks of the Dnieper.
Large crowds again took to the streets across Slovakia on Friday to voice their opposition to populist Prime Minister Robert Fico and his pro-Russian policies. According to Associated Press, the wave of protests is fueled by Fico's recent trip to Moscow for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, a rare visit to the Kremlin by a European Union leader since Moscow's all-out invasion of Ukraine began more than 3 years ago, and his recent remarks that Slovakia might consider leaving the 27-nation EU and NATO. "Shame, shame," people at the Freedom Square in Bratislava chanted. The crowds rallied in over 40 towns and cities at home and abroad, organizers said. The protesters called Fico a traitor. "Slovakia is Europe," they repeated. Fico, who survived an assassination attempt in May 2024, has faced calls to resign over his comments about future EU and NATO membership and his claim that Russia had security reasons to invade Ukraine. The crowd condemned recent pro-Russian activities of Fico's close associates. They include remarks by Eric Kalinak, who said that Slovakia would finally have a reliable neighbor if the Russian troops conquered Ukraine, Slovakia's neighbor. Kalinak is the chief advisor of Fico's government, a member of the European Parliament and Fico's deputy in the leftist Smer party. Luboš Blaha, a prominent member of Fico's party who is known for his extreme leftist rhetoric, met this week Sergei Naryshkin, the head of Russia's SVR spy agency, on one of his trips to Moscow. Fico's views on Russia have sharply differed from the European mainstream. He returned to power last his party won a parliamentary election in 2023. He has since ended Slovakia's military aid for Ukraine, criticized EU sanctions on Russia and vowed to block Ukraine from joining NATO. He declared Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as an enemy after Ukraine halted on Russian gas supplies to Slovakia and some other European customers.
Dnes viac ako kedykoľvek predtým v nás rezonuje odkaz
bol jeho otec bojovať za svoju vlastnú krajinu, za jej bezpečnosť, za spravodlivosť a za demokratickú budúcnosť.
Majú síce iné mená a iné tváre, ale zlo sa neskrie za žiadnu falošnú masku. Mladí odchádzajú študovať do zahraničia a domov sa vracajú protestovať za slobodu vo vlastnej krajine. Kam sme sa to dostali? Už roky počúvame prázdne sľuby a vidíme, ako sa naše nádeje a ambície strácajú v systéme, ktorý nás nepočúva. Ak sa nič nezmení, odídu ďalší, pretože si zaslúžime viac.